this year they released newish songs, and you're somebody who can possibly answer because you were in a specific gap of that band that is highly questioned. So are you familiar with Hard Skool? The song is now officially released. We're not talking about leaks anymore, which you may have been asked about in previous interviews. So we have actual GNR material. Have you listened to Hard Skool when it was rumored? It could have been Checkmate, could have been Jackie Chan. You were at a very integral part after Matt Sorum left. So do you know of that?
The only reason I know about the track Hard Skool at all is my publishing company emailed me about maybe a week and a half ago, and said, hey, do you know anything about the song Hard Skool? Did you have anything to do with the writing of it? Because it's coming out or it just came out. We want to know what the splits are. Because I guess it was done when I was in the studio with them, but we recorded so much material. And after I left, they worked on so much stuff post me being there. And it was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago now that I was there, that there's a few things that I really had a big hand in on the writing. For instance, the title track, Chinese Democracy, I wrote the music to it. There was a few other songs that had working titles that never ended up on the Chinese Democracy record, but were laying around. I know at least when we recorded them 20 years ago, Axl liked them a lot. And once again, when I was there, they didn't have any lyrics yet, so they just had these working titles. And so when Hard Skool came out and I listened to it, I went, God, maybe that is one of the songs that I wrote that they since, later put lyrics to. Like when I was there in the studio with them, the song Chinese Democracy wasn't called Chinese Democracy yet. I think the working title was Smells Like Josh Spirit, because I wrote it and the chords are really simple. It's just like these three chords over and over and over. And someone at one point goes, this sounds like kind of a cool like Nirvana riff or something. So it was titled Smells Like Josh Spirit, like up on the board where we had all the songs we were working on. Axl hadn't written lyrics to it yet, and that didn't happen until after I left. So once again, when I went, okay, Hard Skool, let me listen to that, because maybe that's what this song turned into, or that song turned into. I listened to it. I didn't recognize hardly any of it, That being said, maybe I did write some of it. Maybe because once again, it was 22 years ago, but there was 2 or 3 things that I brought in where I really wrote the majority of the music, and I would definitely recognize instantly. As a matter of fact, before the track started playing, I'm like, I wonder if it's going to be this one, or this one, because there was a few that were pretty cool that didn't end up getting used. But that wasn't one of them. But did they release more stuff, or just that one track?
Absurd.
Last week.
It was like maybe a month or so ago. They also released Absurd, which was which was Silkworms.
Oh, so, yeah, I didn't have anything to do with that one.
Okay, good. Something you said earlier, just about your album cover, about just get it out. I don't want to mess with it. And sometimes people just think about that in the opposite with Chinese Democracy and just constantly.
Well, exactly. I've seen what it's like to double and triple guess yourself to death and spin your wheels and take too long on stuff. And then you start freaking out. You can really start getting in your own head about things. And I think there's a lot to be said for going with your gut and your initial instinct towards what you like or don't like. And I remember being in the studio years ago with the great record producer, Brendan O'Brien. And I believe it was an Offspring record we were working on in the early 2000s. And I'd cut some drums that afternoon, and I was leaving the studio, and they were going to do some guitars that evening, and there was some guitar amps set up in the live room, and there was a bunch of different microphones on each amp, right? Let's say 2 or 3 different microphones in each amp. So as I'm getting my laptop together, finding my keys in the control room and saying bye to everybody, I can hear Brennan and the second engineer at the studio kind of like, he goes, okay, bring up channel 12, bring up the first microphone, the 414 on the Marshall cabinet. He brings it up, plays guitar, he goes, God, sounds great to me. Let's just start tracking. They didn't even bother hearing the second or third microphone, because it's like, okay, the second microphone might have sounded really great. The third microphone might have sounded really great, maybe not as good. But the first microphone sounded awesome. And Brennan's like, what else? I don't need anything else. So maybe we could make it 1% better. It sounds fucking great. Let's move on. you know? And there's something to be said for being able to do that and being able to commit and press forward, you know, and not get caught up in the technicality end of things, and all of a sudden it's going to start stifling whatever creative flow that you've got going at the time, you know. And I've watched that not just with the Guns N' Roses situation, but with a lot of bands where I'll be at the studio where you start to double and triple guess yourself, and then you start doubting yourself, and then it becomes this weird cycle, you know. Also at the same time, you've got to put in the work, and you don't want to just like crap it out and say, screw it, let's move on. But for me, it's like when I saw the album cover, I'm like, okay, I like that album cover, you know, and I can sit here and go back and forth with them on different shades of yellow. And what if it makes the title Just a Minute pop a little? It's like, it looks great, it's fine, I think it looks cool. Let's move on to the next thing, you know? And that's something I just kind of learned over time and is really helpful, you know?
Okay. Yeah, I understand that. And I guess that kind of parlays into, and if you have to, and I know, I by the way, I have no problem with your interruptions. Your wife has precedent over me, but if I know you have another interview, but I want to keep you here forever. So if you have to give me, you know, like a 1-2 minute warning or something like that, by the way.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So just with that then, and I don't like calling you a journeyman drummer because you have just been so iconic in every band that you've been in. So when it came to Guns N' Roses, was there ever a point where like, I want to ride this for a while? Then with the recording of Chinese Democracy and seeing how long that was taking, is that why you decided to leave and just, you know what, get down?
I mean, I will say this. I will say that, you know, Axl Rose being as intriguing and controversial as he's been in the past, as a entity and a rock star, everyone always wants to, you know, man, tell me some crazy Axl Rose stories. And I've said it a trillion times before, but it's just the truth. The time I spent with him, he was generous, he was cool, he was likable. I've never had any problem, and I don't have any funny story to tell you other than I got along great with him. And I was kind of sad to leave because most people take it personally if you quit their band or if you leave the situation. And I don't know how personally he took it or not, but I was hoping that he wouldn't, because I liked the guy. And I've only seen him once since then. I ran into him during Coachella about 5 years ago, maybe. And he was super cool. He was great, and we had a laugh, and it was really nice to see him. But you know, for me, the 2 years I spent in the studio with them, I had a 2-year contract, and when it was up, I was able to kind of like re-examine it and renew it or not. And I just didn't see them leaving that studio anytime soon. And I was kind of going, man, am I going to sit here for another 2 years in this control room in the studio while they like fidget with stuff? I don't know if I want to spend another 2 years of my life doing this, you know? At the same time, on the weekends, I'd been kind of messing around with Billy Howardell and Maynard James Keenan and starting a Perfect Circle. And that was like a tangible, real thing. Like, hey, we're going to make a record and we're going to get a deal. And we're going to leave on tour in a couple months or next month or whatever it was. Like, we're going to book shows. Let's go. And I was like, okay, this is like a regular thing. This isn't being isolated up, you know, in some ivory tower somewhere away from the rest of the world in a weird bubble, which I felt like kind of Guns N' Roses was. I mean, that being said too, there's a lot of pressure on Axl, and he was kind of doing it without his regular band for the first time ever. So I think that was unnerving probably for him, and a little bit scary, you know. But anyways, it was something that I enjoyed the time I spent down there, but I didn't want to sit around anymore. And that's kind of what it was looking like was going to happen. And they did kind of not sit around, but they spent a lot more time on the record still after I left. And I was glad that I made that record, The Perfect Circle, and went out on tour and we started that, you know. That was a little bit more of a real band to me and something that I was really a part of from the ground up, rather than being the third or fourth drummer in line in a project. You know what I mean?